I need to say one more thing in this context because I have to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
there's a problem. We have a problem. I call it kitchen sink problem. Kitchen
Uh-oh.
sink problem. And what is that? Because we have been adding technology after technology after technology.
Yes.
Oh, we need this side blunt zone, and I need an alert. Okay, add an alert, add this, add that, add that. Nobody thought, step back and say, hey, what is it doing to the consumer? What is it doing to
Yes.
the in-car experience? Am I inundating
Yep.
the consumer and also the overall in-car environment with this, right? So there's
Yep.
a huge place for going back, really stepping
Yes.
back, stepping away, and say, you know what? How can I simplify it? Simplify not just by adding features, by subtracting feature. How I
Yes.
can make it much simple so that I can just go in and drive and get benefit of the safety technologies without too much education. Okay, I agree that we need the education at the current level of
Oh,
current
yeah.
state of affairs, but at the same time, and there will always be need for education
Yes.
for more informed drivers. But at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, there is also a huge opportunity and need, I would say, to simplify the in-car environment, to
Yes.
simplify the features we have, and say, you know what, we don't need those features anymore. We don't need to cram in just because we can.
Right.
I
I
had to say it.
agree.
I had to say it.
I agree.
Exactly. No, that's true, and that actually does kind of tie into our last segment for you here.
Get ready for a dynamic episode of Features Talk.
Hello, LinkedIn fam. We are back again for another episode of the Features Talk podcast live right here on LinkedIn, where
Woo!
we are where we are bringing the voices from every corner of the automotive technology world to empower you with the knowledge that matters the most. And so, joining me with the not with as always is our product specialist Luke Versput. Welcome back, Luke.
Hi, everyone. Hello. Another day, another Features Talk podcast, as I always say. It's
Yes.
cool. Yeah, we have even more good topics. We always seem to have good topics. How about that? Um, and it's really cool this time because as we've done before, we've been really fortunate at Features First to make a lot of really amazing friends in really amazing places in the industry, and we have one such friend joining us today. So Lisa, who graces us with their presence this time?
Yes, today we have a very special guest. Partha Goswami is joining us today. We are going to be diving into this fascinating shift that cars are no longer just driving, right? They are becoming pretty powerful connectors in our community. They're talking to traffic lights, they're reducing congestion, and they're making our daily drives smoother and safer. And surprise, surprise, ADAS plays a crucial role in that shift. And so I am so excited to have Partha join us today. He is the founder of PG Mobility Analysis. He's also a strategist and a futurist specializing in emerging technology and disruption in the mobility industry. And this is not something he's just starting. He has 30 plus years of experience. So we have a vet. We have someone who is experienced in our midst today in the automotive industry, in R&D, in planning, technology strategy. He's worked for multiple car manufacturers. And at PG Mobility Analysis, what he is doing is really focusing on the transformation around connectivity, ADAS and autonomous vehicles, software and services, electrification, and software defined vehicles, which is a pretty hot topic right now. Our last expert guest, Carl, he talked about software defined vehicles. So I'm glad to continue that conversation today. And Partha also is analyzing automotive trends. I mean, he's producing insights and he's exploring the startup ecosystem. So welcome, Partha, to the show. We are so thrilled to have you.
Woo.
Thank you. And I really appreciate this warm welcome. Thank you very much. And I'm excited to be here. And as you just said, the transformation in the industry, the automotive industry and mobility industry in general is something my passion. I pretty much did some of the same stuff when I was working in, at least my last role at General Motors. And essentially I continue to do that. This is extremely exciting for me, and every day that gives me very good reason to get up and start figuring out, what happened last night that I haven't been really following enough. So very glad to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yes, absolutely. And, we're going to have some fun today. We've got some really good questions that I think are going to change some perspectives for consumers that are curious about what the future of mobility would look like. And what are we talking about with software defined vehicles? What does that even mean in that transition? But before we dive into that, I want to do an icebreaker question because, yes, I want the audience to get to know you. So, what first sparked your curiosity about mobility and technology? Was there a moment in your life when you thought, this is the space I want to dedicate myself to, because you've put some time into this space? And so what was that first, moment that really sparked your curiosity?
Yeah. Actually, there was one. And I know
Okay.
some of my friends know the story. So, I don't know if my friends are today listening to this. Maybe it's a repeat for somebody, but it's true. So I tell people that my entire career is divided into two parts. One is pre-iPhone, another is post-iPhone. Okay. Like you said, what does it mean? Am I an iPhone nerd? Not at all. But what it means is just about the time, actually just after the time, I think iPhone came up, iPad came up, not iPad, iPod came up.
Oh, wow.
Just about the same time, long back now. It seems like it's way behind in our rear view mirror. But about the same time, I went to attend consumer electronics show. And the same very year, Ford Motor introduced their first more like a system-based infotainment system. They called it Sync. And GM had multiple things in the in their hopper at the same time, working in the same direction. But what happened was there's a light bulb that went on and told me that things are going to change. Consumers are asking, hey, I have this phone, which is not just a phone. Purpose of the phone is to make phone calls, talk to people. At least that was the original intent. But really, the phone became a platform for a variety of functions. Okay. So a combination of, kind of seeing that happening and seeing how things are about to happen in the car industry told me that someday the vehicle will become a platform as well. At least at that point, I knew that is going to become more than what it was, which was basically a collection of sheet metals. Okay. I'm not trying to reduce the complexity of the sheet metals, but in general, that's the thing, right? It was a fixed product. Once it's sold, you cannot do anything about it. You cannot change it, you cannot update it, so on and so forth. Exactly. So that really was the beginning. And I came back, and I always had the good fortune of, in my leadership, allowing me to do that. And eventually that became my full-time job. Watching the industry, understanding where things are going, looking at the development of technology happening inside the company, advising a lot of the groups, telling them what the future might be, and never stop doing it.
That segues perfectly into the first question that we have for you, because I want to set the stage first for this evolution of cars that is happening right now. And with that, cars have come a long way from just what you said, from being mostly mechanical to being powered by software, right? So my question is, how do you explain this evolution to the everyday driver? This is just in simple terms. How would you explain this evolution?
Right. So there are multiple ways to look at it. I start from my engineer's outlook to begin with, right? That the car, like you said, was a mechanical system. You cannot change it. But then came this whole new idea that we could do something different, where every function in the car will be a software application. Okay. This whole idea of service oriented architecture that came from the software industry, right? And historically, pretty much right after the time that I talked about, when I had this the new idea that cars are going to change, we have seen in the last, let's say 20 plus years, we have seen the birth of 10 new car companies, most of them in China, starting with Tesla here. Okay, Tesla, Rivian, the Neo, and even the latest one, the Xiaomi in China, which by the way was a phone company few short years back, right? And these companies, they said, no, we're going to do a clean sheet design. We're going to design the car very differently, right? And that really was the beginning of this idea of vehicle as a software based platform where we could change things going forward, not let's say sacrificing the safety, because safety is paramount. And I always tell people that there is this metaphor, smartphone on wheels. Okay.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely wrong metaphor. Okay. The purpose of the vehicle remains to safely transport people or cargo, as the case may be, safely from point A to point B. It has to work every time. Every time you start the vehicle, there is no crash. It cannot crash. So those things are given, right? But within that context, the car can be a lot more than what it was. And that's really was the beginning, starting with these new companies. And we can talk about how the evolution happened, but basically at some point in time, traditional car companies says, oh my god, this particular car company, let's say Tesla, their customers are so excited because in the morning they see that something has changed in the car, just by virtue of the car being connected and something was updated, whatnot. Why aren't we doing it, or why can't we do it? Right? So that really was the beginning of this evolution.
Yeah, and that makes me, in the previous episode with Carl Anthony, one of the other experts recently that we had on, he said there was one thing that I was just reminded of when you said safety first. Is he said in his delivery to the customer, he would always say, this is a safety first vehicle. This is a safety first device. And so when we talk about, driver assistance systems, technologies that are created to improve the safety of the driver when they're operating that vehicle, I think that conversation and that delivery of that safety aspect is so important when we're talking about this evolution, because like you said, we can get caught up in the hype of everything that's happening. Because I can remember, back when you get the vehicle and you have this free subscription to, Sirius radio, right? And most people did not continue the subscription. They enjoyed the music for a certain period of time. It was a comfort type of thing, an entertainment feature. But now we're talking about technologies that can improve your ability to drive, to reduce the risk of a collision. And so I feel like even as this shift in the industry is happening, talking about safety is most important. And it can formulate the importance of the adoption of this evolution that is happening. And so the industry right now is buzzing about software defined vehicles, right? So we're going from mechanics to software, meaning your vehicle, you move from you buying a vehicle and it never changing to now I can be at home and the vehicle can be improved. And so I know there's a lot of talk about software defined vehicles and what that means. And we've kind of gone over that, but what do you think that really means for the average car buyer, and how does that change the ownership experience?
Oh yeah, that actually is the that's a very important question, because you could, in terms of technology, you can say a lot of things. What exactly is software defined vehicle? Well, it's a new architecture where software is decoupled from hardware, and the car is always connected to the cloud, and you can every function in the car is a software which you can change, which you can update, right? It's all good. What does it mean for the consumer? And I would say, what's the value proposition, right? So I think there are two main value propositions, and it depends on who you ask. But the way I think it is really two. One is the vehicle, because the vehicle can update it, okay,
Yeah.
it actually can get refreshed up to a point. It's not like a vehicle at some point in time, age will catch up. Okay.
Mhm.
You cannot update a old car whose compute platform has already become archaic, right? So that's not
Right.
going to happen. There are limitations. Okay. I just don't want to say, hey, it's an open-ended everyday refresh. But within
Right.
those limits, we will see, or we are seeing, that a lot of things can change. So whatever you start with is not necessarily what you would be experiencing going forward if done right. Okay, there are a lot of challenges, there are security issues and all that, but we can leave that aside for now. So that's kind of number one. And number two, from a, again, consumer experience part of is, I can now personalize the vehicle in some sense. Okay, the vehicle can, in theory, learn from how I'm driving it, and if I do have the right AI based training built into the vehicle, the vehicle can actually say, oh, okay, Lisa, that's how you drive. That's where you go on a Thursday evening, every Thursday evening. That's what you do on Saturday. And it will say, you know what, let me give you better suggestions on how to make those travels better for you. All right. Just one example, right? And again, there are ways to do it. I don't want to kind of paint a hugely nice and everything is nice and dandy picture. There are always challenges, but in essence, the value proposition is that I can update the vehicle, I can have a completely different experience which can be personalized, and it can connect to the rest of my digital life.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. And I'm listening to a music and I walk into the vehicle, let's say Spotify, right? And I automatically, it transition to my whatever I was listening to in that car environment. A very small example, but these are not future. This is here and now.
Yeah, we actually had a previous episode where we really talked a lot about and this was one that Lisa and I, we talked a lot um about how does a about it's important for the owner to learn their new car, but how does the car learn about them? And it was a lot about we did kind of talk about some AI features like AI adaptive smart cruise control, where the adaptive cruise control will pick up on your kind of acceleration and deceleration habits, and yeah, that's one of them. And then also the car being able to update itself in the U.S. Tesla was really kind of the first to popularize that, and and then, like you mentioned, Xiaomi, BYD, and a lot of other brands overseas have really gone even further with that. Um, and and I will say, from a product specialist point of view, it has kind of it has changed the game on our end a little bit. This was in our episode with Carl Anthony, who was for many years a product specialist himself, like doing a lot of what I do now. And we talked a lot about how it changes the game on the product specialist side of things, because our education then um, has to grow and, well, I guess, be updated along with that.
Mhm.
There's
Yeah.
there's more to teach, and we did also mention that the bottom line of safety and how these things impact safety features does stay the same. But yeah,
Yeah.
personalizing the experience, I think, is really what that comes down to.
And the education that you mentioned
Mhm.
is very important, and mainly because the traditional car companies, and I worked in a traditional car company, right, as opposed to those 10 other companies that I mentioned, right? And the traditional companies, the challenge is they have been doing things in a certain way for 50, 60, in some cases even 100 years, right?
Oh, yeah.
And suddenly they are faced with this change. Okay,
Mhm.
so it's not a small change, it's a huge monumental transformation, right? And that is their challenge. But at the same time, if you look at from the user's point of view, okay, the users have been driving the car in a certain way, at least the user that are in a certain demographics, okay, and suddenly, and that includes me too, and suddenly you see that so many possibilities happening, right? And I need to understand better, so how can I make the best of it, right? And the cars, the consumers have been complaining, I don't even know where all these ADAS features hide that people keep talking about and kind of make a lot of hoopla about. Where are they? Where can I find it? Is it 3 menus down in my screen? So there are work to be done. There are education to basically disseminate, so that consumers can learn better, they understand better, and the car companies can also make the right changes so that all these features are more effective and
Yes.
useful in the hands of the consumers.
Yes. Yes, you just hit the nail on the head right there. I want to go a little deeper because we're going to touch a bit on this idea of smart cities and how these driver assistance systems, I mean, the way we talk about it now, we know them to be blind spot monitoring. We know them to be lane keeping assist, right? It's these systems that we are experiencing behind the wheel. And what I want to do is take our audience a little bit deeper for them to understand that ADAS plays multiple roles in the vehicle. It's not just how it's benefiting you, but now it's benefiting cities, and the sensors are benefiting cities. And so my question to you, Partha, is how do you see ADAS systems extend beyond helping the driver and actually contributing data to the larger transportation ecosystem? Because I think that that is even important for us consumers to know the use case and applications of ADAS and how our adoption will then increase some of these areas as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Okay, because when you think of safety, when I think of safety, I really think of safety in a holistic sense. It's not just the car, okay, we have the ADAS features, we have all these airbags in the car, it's a nice cage, and I can make it as safe as I can, but that's not safety to
Yeah.
me. Safety is not vehicle safety, it's really road safety,
Yes.
meaning infrastructure safety, meaning safety for everybody who's using that infrastructure in some
Yes.
way, right? So that is really the holistic safety I have in mind. And the interaction between the vehicle and the infrastructure,
Yes.
whether it's a smart city system or whatever that be, I think it's really underrepresented in our discourse, in our conversation. Okay.
Yes.
And the vehicle, of course, it's a system, it's a great system with so many, hundreds of sensors. It's collecting so much data about the environment, about the driving condition, about the driver's performance, about the weather and all that stuff, right? Those data, there has to be a connection between those vehicles on the road and the larger ecosystem around it. That has not happened so far. That they are always looked at piecemeal. Yes, we have ITS, intelligent transport systems, a lot of things are happening, but I don't see that complete 100%, kind of a hip locked, if you may, between the car and its environment, right? So that's kind of the general picture. Now coming to the specifics, okay, how can the car, the ADAS systems actually do better or connect better with the broader smart city or whatever the bigger system is, right? I think there are a lot of ways to do that. There are for example, all the sensors, those data, if collected properly and transferred to the city system, they give you a live real-time sense of what the road system is like right now, today. Okay. Collecting how the cars are collectively braking, accelerating, if they are experiencing a slippery patch, or if there are potholes that their suspension system is experiencing, right? Collecting that data and analyzing and transferring into a map where that the city authorities who are responsible for the infrastructure, they can basically say, what, this is how I need to plan my next all the road repair that I have in plan.
Yeah.
Right. Then there are companies who are already doing it. There are car companies who want to participate in that process too. There's a company called Nira Dynamics, I believe, and they actually do exactly that. They collect the data, then they kind of package it, morph it, and send it out to whoever can use them. And there are many such companies or startups who are in that range. So that's kind of one. The other, right now, it's not even nothing future, it's happening right now. You can actually improve, you can use the ADAS sensors such as the camera, okay, and you can use it for what in Europe they call ISA, intelligent speed assessment, I think ISA is the term. Essentially, the car has access to maps and it knows what the current speed limit is on a particular road, but if it can also read the speed limit numbers
Yeah.
as it driving, that gives it an additional information about how to drive safely. Okay, even if there are some issue with the cloud or the connectivity or the cloud data, whatever. So now you can actually read the system right now, not requiring any new additional sensor, but using the car's additional existing camera, right? So talking about camera, there are other interfaces that can help, not necessarily the broader city infrastructure, but let's say the mobility industry. Sorry, the fleet mobility industry, right? So we have at GM, for example, we developed Super Cruise, which is a hands-free system, but the hands-free system comes with another responsible, component, which is to understand, to make sure the driver has full attention to the road, and that is guaranteed by the orchestration of what the camera sees, how the camera is looking at the driver, and making sure the driver is always looking at the road. This
the facial and the eye tracking. We've talked about Super Cruise before.
Yeah, and I have seen those development in real time when we first started talking about it. I would say around 2014, 15, 11 years back, right? And today they are mainstream. There are multiple companies. Ford has Blue Cruise. I think Mercedes has Drive Pilot. Nissan has Pro Pilot, for example, right? So now, but the I was in a conference last week, right? The one I was talking about earlier, which was really partly about fleet mobility, right? There are a lot of fleet mobility companies who have, let's say, 500 trucks or vehicles, right? They have drivers. They want their drivers to be safe. So using those cameras, collecting this data, collectively, and at the back office, making sure not to basically do a surveillance, okay, but really to monitor the driver, his or her state of attention, fatigue.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's a huge one, because long distance drivers, they actually are vulnerable to that, right? To making sure what's the right duration, if that person is kind of becoming fatigued, and take a break. Those are the things that can come from data, the sensor data right in the vehicle today, that might be used for some other ADAS type functions. You can go on, but you get a sense, hopefully.
Yeah. And I think that's so fascinating. Especially with facial recognition, driving distracted, whether that's tired, whether you're texting, these advancements in these technologies, they absolutely improve the safety of the driver. We've worked with fleet owners before, and they've had 4,500 fleet drivers, and we had to develop training for some of their technologies that they retrofitted on their fleet. And the cameras and sensors were huge, because there were a lot of accidents hitting standstill objects, and getting too close and overestimating. And so we see a lot of fleet owners relying on these driver assistance systems, these cameras, these sensors, to improve that safety as well. Now, we talked a little bit about V2I, which is vehicle to infrastructure. So that's these technologies that can communicate with the infrastructure, but there's also vehicle to vehicle communication, which is being worked on right now. It's another big piece as well. And so, Partha, what does V2V look like in practice? And how could it change the way we respond to potential accidents?
Yeah. So you mentioned V2I, vehicle to infrastructure, V2X, which is vehicle to anything. V2V is you can think of it as a subset of that whole domain. Unfortunately, and I say from experience, because I've been following this particular space probably for at least 15 years or more, okay? And we came pretty close to actually implementing those technologies, but for one thing or another, we did not have a very clear governmental mandate, okay? And in the meantime, technology changed from DSRC to more cellular-based or so-called CV2X technology, and it kind of, it stayed stagnant, and the value that could be extracted from that powerful, set of functions which can very directly add to the safety of the vehicle, was basically never done. And there are many reasons. We can talk it separately, but whether there are reasons or not, the fact of the matter is vehicle to vehicle technology has many, if done right, not technology for technology's sake, but if weaved appropriately, weaved into the in vehicle experience, the cockpit experience, yes, it can do a lot of good stuff. So, but the first and foremost is where V2V is really powerful is in understanding the traffic where you do not have line of sight. Okay, and so you're coming you're coming this way, there's a huge building or a complete obstruction, you don't know what's happening, and maybe it's an open crossing. Okay, but the V2B would tell you that, hey, there's a car coming in the crossroad right now at so and so speeds, right? And that can happen in multiple ways. That can happen through the infrastructure, but it can also happen to this peer-to-peer communication. Again, the technology, I'm agnostic to the technology, whether it was the old DSRC or the new CV2X using their so-called peer-to-peer mode. It can tell you, I can tell you, hey, look, I'm coming at 80 miles per hour, and so be aware, and you can take those notification, right? And so that's kind of one thing. The other thing is kind of extension of that, emergency vehicles. And I don't know about you, I have been in situations where maybe I was listening to music, or maybe whatever, I actually missed approaching emergency vehicle in my cross street, right? Nothing happened. I was not, I was driving at a moderate speed, so I stopped and everything. But I wish, I said, oh my goodness, I should have realized it at least a few seconds earlier, right? So providing that sort of input inside the car based on the direction that particular vehicle is coming from is another powerful V2V application that directly translates to road safety. Okay, not every time, but there would be out of 100, maybe there are one situation where something happened because the car was or missed that approaching fast moving vehicle. It happens, right? So and there are a whole I would say further development, so you can develop that idea further. I was just reading incidentally this morning in California, Nissan is doing an experiment, and they are using their ProPilot technology, which is essentially something like hands-free driving potentially if they have the camera, but they are using with that technology on board and the communication. They had few similarly equipped cars on the road, and they were essentially telling the vehicle behind them that, hey guys, you are driving a little fast, you're approaching a little too fast on me, right? So what that does is that essentially gives you that gives a sense that I need to kind of start decelerating rather than reach a situation where I have to brake hard. And they are calling this system CCM, cooperative congestion management. I kind of read that article. I said I have to bring it up in the conversation today. So it's called CCM, cooperative congestion management. Essentially, by having that communication between cars that are on the road, you can adjust everybody's speed that is much more consistent with the flow. Sometimes we drive faster than the average flow. That does not give us any advantage. We just end up braking too hard and basically increasing the problem even more. So it's kind of, the idea is to kind of look at those situations, and it's still an experimental idea, but again gives you a sense where the V2V communication can actually help in this particular case, congestion on the road. And again, managing the congestion better is also another way to manage your safety of rear end collisions better.
There's two things. First of all, I love what you just said. I was reminded of two things. When I was younger, driving with my parents, we did not, for some reason, I can't remember because it was so long ago, but I do remember it was a ambulance, and it was coming so fast down the road. I mean, I'm talking about we were inches away from being hit by that. I don't know if my dad didn't hear. I don't remember exactly all the details, but
Yeah.
if we would have at that time had a notification that came to our phones, just like we get a notification if someone is abducted,
Yeah.
just like we get a notification of, a bunch of emergency
Mm.
things that we need to be aware of. I know of quite a few collisions that have happened and people have lost their lives because they didn't hear. And I know of a technology, I believe it's Haas Alert, it's HAAS. I don't know if you've heard
Yeah.
of.
Oh, I know them very well. And I was
Okay.
going to mention them, but yes,
Yes.
go on, keep going. Yeah.
Yes, they have an amazing solution that
Mm.
is connected with all of the emergency vehicles, and it sends drivers that notification that, hey, there
Mm.
is a ambulance coming down the road. There's a fire truck. And so really understanding all of these safety use cases with the data collection and the technologies, I think for me as a consumer myself, a customer myself, thinking about that and making a decision on, do I want to adopt this? Do I want to participate with this? Do I want to sign up for these types of things? Yes, I do. Because understanding that safety implication and that safety aspect and how it affects
Mm.
me in my life is
Mm.
so it changes your perspective on what we're seeing happen in this industry. It's not
Right.
just about getting a Tesla. It's not just about getting some decked out, car with the latest technology. It's how can this improve what we're seeing on the roads as thousands of people dying? You mentioned rear collisions. That's one of the most frequent accidents that happen on a daily basis.
Yep.
So
Yep.
to know that there's technology that's being developed, obviously you're going to have those defiant drivers that are going to do what they want to do, right? And those people, every time I see them, I saw one recently. I'm like, this is why technology is being created, and for people like you, and if we get too far into it, they think about creating technology. I've seen it um, that can actually intervene if you're speeding. And so obviously there, are drivers that are like, that's, a breach of our rights as far as a driver. But, where do we draw the line here
Yeah. Yeah.
between
Yeah.
the deaths
And
on the road, uh-huh.
right, right. And I would just kind of take the opportunity here to kind of emphasize that
Mm-hmm.
driver distraction, I would say
Yes.
smartphone based driver distraction
Yep.
Mhm.
is a plague. It's really a national plague. Okay.
Yes.
It's so dangerous. And there not a single day goes by, okay, when I'm on the highway
Mm-hmm.
and somebody's driving kind of either slow or something, and I look at it, that person is reading,
Yes.
okay, at
Yeah, you,
traffic
you look
light.
over and you see.
Yeah, a traffic light, it turns green. I have three cars ahead of me. Nobody's moving.
Yes.
Okay. And everybody starts saying, what's happening? The first person is doing that.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
that is dangerous. That is not something trivial. Okay. In Michigan, we have some law, not a great law around that. Actually, it's not legal to drive and text and drive, for example.
That's right.
And that came about because of the of relentless lobbying by somebody. Okay,
Yep.
actually he happened to be an executive from General Motors, and because of his strong lobby, his son died. His son was just freshman
Mm,
at a school nearby,
mm.
just 60-70 miles away. He was just driving home over the weekend, and the distracted driver was involved in a crash that killed him, right?
Boy.
So that through the lobby that happened. But I don't think that has been a national situation where we do have very clear cut guideline and enforcement, and we need to
Yes.
somehow we need to do something about it, because driver distraction is a real problem. And all the safety solutions or the features and the ADAS that you pack into the vehicle, that become meaningless
Yep.
when you fall back on that self imposed distraction. Yes.
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
exactly.
that's exactly a point that we've been making pretty much for the entirety of the podcast. Is that the most powerful safety feature is a safe driver. No matter how good technology ever gets,
Yeah.
the safest or the most impactful safety feature is is an attentive driver. And
Right.
so the cool thing is that when you mention, we're talking about the vehicle to vehicle communication, the V2V, the rear end thing is especially the rear end collision thing is especially nice because what I'm thinking is, and I think this is kind of the scenario that you were alluding to is, let's say if you're going along and maybe there's a car in front of you, let's say there's traffic accumulating on the freeway, things are going to slow down. So then, what if, let's say there's two cars with properly implemented V2V communication going on. The car in front might have someone who's distracted if they're not watching or they're not paying attention to traffic accumulating in front of them. That car's system could be doing the math like, every single millisecond, like, okay, at this rate of speed with this closing distance, this driver's not braking enough. It could send something to the car behind it and say, hey, just so you know, this
Mhm.
driver's not braking.
Exactly.
This car's not braking in what would be in what a reasonable person would deem a safe distance. Just be ready for this. This car might suddenly slam on its brakes.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And so,
unfortunately, and I would have to add that, coming from the car industry and seeing for years that nothing is happening in terms of implementation of those technologies, I have to say that, the time for deploying V2V technology was, it's like 5 years back. Okay.
Mhm.
And we are still struggling with it. That's something we need to talk about more. That's kind of number one. And number two, I didn't want to mention Huss alert initially because I was kind of describing the whole thing in the context of this peer-to-peer, the
Yes.
true vehicle-to-vehicle communication. That's not what Huss alert is.
Mhm.
But I applaud anybody who's doing something similar
Yep.
using a different mode, okay, of communication. So
Yep.
it is not vehicle to vehicle, but it's kind of, comes from the cloud to the car to your app, whatever.
Mhm.
Somebody aggregates, all the map of the emergency vehicle at any given moment on the road, and if somebody is, in your proximity, you get notification for that,
Yep.
right? So which
Yep.
is a different, way of doing it. But given that we do not have true V2V implemented yet for one reason or another, primarily for lack of mandates, I
Yeah.
think it's a shame. Let me put it that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it kind of is. It goes back to the old saying of the best time to plant a tree is yesterday.
Mhm.
The
But the
best time.
next best time is now.
Yep. The very best time, exactly. That the whole saying is
Yeah.
the best time to plant a tree is yesterday. The second best time is right this minute.
Yeah, and literally V2X is a 20-year discussion. So the best time was 20 years back, but we should focus on, hey, what can we do right now, and what are the other things? And
Yeah.
there are many ways people are trying to address some of the benefits, in an indirect way, and I think that's the right way to do it.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
that's exactly why we have this program. That's exactly why we have these kinds of conversations is to kind of get a rise on stuff like that.
Yeah. It's you're absolutely right as far as the legislation side of things and the regulation side of things. We can only go so fast without having that support. And so we've talked quite a bit about, the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration and their efforts and what they're trying to do, but they also call for the public to get their opinion. How do you think we should handle this? And so I think it's even more important too when we see that to participate. For us to be able to speak up about what we should be seeing on the roads. And so I want to switch gears a little bit to consumer impact and looking ahead. And so I would say, from a consumer's point of view, Partha, what would you think is the biggest benefit of vehicles that are interconnected? What would you think would be the biggest benefit that consumers should really think about when they're looking at this shift and the participation that they play in it as well?
Yeah. And again, I'll start from safety. No.
Yep. Yep.
Not because that's the topic of the conversation, but because that's what it really is.
Yes.
And a lot of my experience in my work experience in GM, I have to give them credit for starting or basically deploying. They're the first company in the industry to deploy the connectivity. You asked about connectivity,
Mhm.
connectivity for purely for safety.
Yep.
Okay. So this
Yeah.
OnStar program that they started, actually it was launched, I think in the late 90s,
Mhm.
Yeah, it was.
probably. Yeah. And the idea was, the crash notification, something happens, automatic crash notification,
Hmm.
the first responder get the information very quickly, somebody comes, somebody gets, somebody, reaches out to the driver and figures out what it is, and the entire choreography that goes with it, right?
Yeah.
Mainly to do that. Now typically, this is a data that I have seen. Parents were the ones who would probably pay for that particular feature,
Mhm.
and children probably wouldn't care as much,
Yeah.
because think about it, it's not a like a traditional consumer feature per se. It's
Mhm.
more of an insurance.
Yep.
You hope that you never have to use this feature in your entire ownership experience, right?
Yep.
That's just like our insurance, any insurance, right?
Mhm.
But that is really, I think, the first and foremost benefit, that it can make the connectivity can make the vehicle much safer, just because it can provide your connectivity excuse me, connectivity either to back office, or to authorities, or to whoever, right? And that
Yeah.
expanded to the long distance remote immobilizer. You report, my
Yeah.
car has been stolen. Okay,
Right.
well, that car can be stopped right away, because the car is connected.
Yep.
All right.
Hmm.
So that's kind of number one. Right
Mhm.
now, I talked about, we started a discussion on software defined vehicle, right?
Mhm.
And I think I said that the core value proposition, that
Yep.
for the consumer, the core proposition is that the vehicle can be refreshed over time, the car can be personalized, and all those things are possible because the car is connected.
Right.
In other words, a software defined vehicle, by definition, is a connected vehicle, fully
Mhm.
connected vehicle.
Oh yeah.
Without that, you won't be able to reap all the benefits that we are talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. So connectivity is at the heart of all the consumer user experience that we are talking about. And I'm
Yeah.
not talking about watching Netflix in the car and all that. Yeah, that too for sure. But I'm talking things that are a little bit more substantive.
Yep.
Okay. So kind of those are some of the important ones that I think. And lastly, just looking at the future.
Mhm.
Okay, when you look at future, when you think about autonomous, and I am more of a more cautious proponent of the software, sorry, autonomous deployment, because
Yes.
I see a lot of challenges, and I think there's a difference between, which usually doesn't come across in the media, but there's a difference between, it can be done, it can be demonstrated,
Yep.
and it can be commercially affordably at scale
Yep.
deployed for a competitive service.
Yes.
Big
Hmm.
difference between
Yeah.
those two. We are at this previous phase where it can be done, it can be demonstrated, it is being demonstrated, at various different use cases,
Yeah.
various different cities. But this whole affordable, commercial at scale, blah blah blah, we're not there yet, right?
Right.
So that kind of but that those issues are there. But given those limitations, I think autonomous technology is happening, will happen. We'll have to find the right case for deployment at the right time.
Yes.
Now, when that happens, again, autonomous car by definition has to be 100% connected.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Okay, because
Completely.
of just the nature of controls, nature of communication you have to have to your back office.
Yep.
There might be some teleoperation involved. Maybe the car cannot make sense of where it is right now, it needs some human help. Maybe not 100%, maybe 0.01%, doesn't matter. 0.01% is still a non-zero thing, right? So for those, connectivity is going to be hugely important, and we can talk about that in a completely in a separate conversation. But the point I'm trying to make is cellular connection may not be enough, because cellular connection, no matter how extensive it is, it does not give you that 100%. We have seen, and there are studies done which shows the best connectivity, the most reliable connectivity is about 97% in an urban area. If you go into a country, it falls further down. So you need something to basically augment that gap. If you need 100% or 99.99999 whatever percent connectivity, and you need something beyond cellular, you need something which is in the sky, i.e. satellite connectivity. But without digressing into that, those are some of the reasons why connectivity is so much important, or in fact I would say it's essential. It's an essential enabler for today's in-vehicle user experience.
Yeah, I love that you brought up OnStar. I literally at the start of this, I didn't say anything about it, but I was thinking to myself, like, at some point in this episode, I whether Partha's going to bring it up or not, at some point in this episode, I need to somehow mention OnStar, because OnStar was so ahead. I mean, it was so ahead of its time, because there are a few features. There are a lot of important features that have come up over the years, but there are not very many features you could actually point to and quantitatively say that the industry was never the same after it came out. And like, I mean, that's getting into like Volvo's 3-point seatbelt. That's getting into like airbags and stuff like that. I mean, that's like, or traction and stability control. Like OnStar was so ahead of its time, and now automatic crash reporting and all that kind of stuff is actually pretty much ubiquitously common on basically every car. But every single automaker that has ever implemented that owes the popularity of that to OnStar.
No, without a doubt.
And I can't tell you how many. I think I've mentioned this before. Lisa, you and I have talked about this a bunch. I'm sure I've mentioned this on other podcasts before, on other episodes. But the number of people I've gotten over the years with talking about a completely unrelated, different brand asking, does it have OnStar? And so many people have asked me, does it have OnStar? I've also had with work that I've done previously, a customer would show up and ask, do you guys have any Teslas? And this was working for working in with brand new cars from a completely different auto manufacturer that was making their own electric car. They somehow, the name Tesla became so just ingrained in the pop culture in their mind that like an EV is just called a Tesla, or like any kind of connected service, no matter what, it's just called OnStar. But obviously it's not. It's like saying a tissue versus Kleenex. And so it's one of those things, and it's just that's why I was saying OnStar was like, the industry was never the same, because that was GM taught everyone that this could be that was possible, and it's been evolved upon and grown since then. But
everybody has caught up. Most car companies now have something similar. But the thing is,
but they were truly the first. They were the first.
And the other thing I would say, which is kind of not our safety conversation, but and this was kind of during my time in the company, right? Every single car came with OnStar built in. Okay, GM was the only mainstream company. Mainstream meaning, like a full market. Okay, as opposed to say BMW, which only sells in a certain segment, etc., etc.
Right.
The mainstream company who had, I would say not 100%, but again 99.9%. I think that we had some vans that didn't have those as default, but every single car came with that connectivity. It was considered part of the business model, part of the functional model, part of the safety that you need to have, the insurance that you need to have for your this one of those 1 in a million situation that you hope you never get into.
Yep. Yeah,
100,
things were
100%.
never the same after that.
Yeah, true.
Now we've talked a bit about like the responsibility on, well, we've talked about legislation, policy, regulations, and how that plays a big role in the
Mhm.
speed in which, the development
Yeah.
of a lot of these technologies
Mhm.
happen. What role do you think part the automakers and dealerships and even consumers play in building this interconnected ecosystem?
Mhm.
That's I would say not $1 billion, $1 trillion question.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but the thing is there has to be a completely new mindset about the ecosystem and how this device is part of that ecosystem. you know
Mhm.
let me just share something personal here. So I, along with few other folks, I participate in SAE, Society of Automotive Engineers, like a
Mhm.
lot of other people do.
Yep.
And we started a work group, and we called it VIoT,
Mhm.
Vehicle Internet of Things.
Mhm.
And why did we do that? Because we saw that in this organization, it's kind of everything is structured the way it was 50 years back. Everything is structured by silos.
Yes.
Safety system, engine system, propulsion, body structure, blah blah blah, chassis, etc. Right? We
Mhm.
said industry is changing. Okay, whether you talk about connectivity, the whole case, connectivity, autonomous software,
Yeah.
and electrification is changing, and vehicle is no longer your standalone grandfather's car anymore. It's really, all these things we talked about. Okay, connectivity, it's a connected, so it is literally a node in our overall digital ecosystem. And to reflect that, we said let's call our work group VIoT, and we will focus entirely on the cross-functional nature of the new car,
Mm.
and we will explore topics of discussion that fits into that paradigm.
Yeah.
Okay, so and so I'm kind of mentioning this to kind of to give some context to your question. So how the OEMs and their supply chain, to be, it's not just
Yes.
the car, supply chain, and the dealers, and
Mhm.
everybody should kind of say nucleate around this idea that our car is no longer a standalone product that you sell, wash your hands off, and you're done. It's not that at all. It is a live machine that you have to every day work with, learn from it, understand it,
Yep.
support it, save it, whatever, right? And there are many work that needs to be done. For
Yep.
example, we literally are in a very early phase of all this transition we talked about. Yes, we have lots of cars with ADAS features, but you know what? That is not, we have not reached a practical stage of
Oh yeah.
affordability with them. Okay,
Oh
what I mean by that,
yeah.
your
Mhm.
car, no matter which car you are driving, behind your bumper, if it has a decent set of ADAS features, you probably have a radar behind it. Okay,
Yep.
if it is a little bit more sophisticated or high end, maybe if it is a lighter, right?
Yep.
And then what happens is, in a simple accident, fender bender kind of thing, you just touch something somewhere, send the car to the dealership or wherever, and they come
Yep.
back, they give you a bill for $4,000.
Yes.
Okay,
Talk
and
about
and right, and why is that? Because we have to not only replace that, you have to get a new one. And
yes.
oh, you can't fix it because the once it's done, it's optically useless. So
Mhm.
therefore you get a new one, and then you have to calibrate it. Calibration is a complex art in itself. There
Mm.
aren't too many machines that do it. The machines are very expensive. There
Yeah.
aren't too many
Mhm.
technicians who do it. So I think this is not sustainable. Okay, to
Yes.
kind of say that insurance industry are writing off vehicles just because of ADAS, sensors cannot be replaced at a reasonable
Exactly.
cost, right?
Yeah.
And that is not sustainable. So we have to kind of take the leap, next step, where we are not getting rid of any of those. We are making the best of those features, but at a design approach that would actually help the consumer afford it in a reasonable way. The repair, the fix, which is a necessary part of it. I'm
Yes,
not a big fan of, a lot of car companies are trying to go direct, and they have good reason to do that. Okay. And I'm kind of, it's nice to see that development happening. But I do think having a clear group of people who can stay with you and repair your car, because the
yes,
car is, I cannot throw the car off just like that. It's not sustainable. So we coming back to your question, everybody will have has a role to play. We need to
yes,
discuss this more openly, more broadly, not
yes,
as something that insurance industry is complaining, therefore let's look into that. The repair of the vehicle, repairability of the vehicle, and how, what's dealer's role in it, and how that can serve the consumers, serve the consumers better, I think
yes.
is a very important part of safety discussion.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, and yes. I mean, just check off all those boxes because I completely agree. I mean, a lot of the feedback that you get from the consumer at the level is the cost to maintain the technology, which then is like, I don't even want it. I just spoke to a driver. His windshield, which is very common for rocks to fall off on your car in California, and your windshield is cracked. That's pretty common, and we're talking about almost $2,000. And now he's trying to figure out, well, can I get a used part? Can I? And so now we're talking about compromised quality.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you are absolutely correct. And this is
yeah.
part of the vision that I had when I saw the writing on the wall from the consumer's perspective, of teaching my son how to drive and looking at driver's education and seeing that we're not preparing everyone to understand their participation in this technology shift that's happening. And so you are absolutely right. I love how you answered that question. So we're almost at time, but before we
Yeah.
get to time, I
Time
do want to
flies.
shift. Yeah.
Yeah, time flies exactly. The one I had a short thing just to add to that, which is that one of the big things that I feel strongly about is obviously is educating the
Yeah.
customers on that kind of thing. Um, the education of how all those features work and how they can work is something that I always try to focus on that with people, with customers. I always like to go really in depth on educating them about those features, and we've done stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah,
We've had
yeah,
training
yeah,
material and stuff like that on this.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And I need to say one more thing in this context because I have to say it.
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
sure.
there's a problem. We have a problem. I call it kitchen sink problem. Kitchen
Uh-oh.
sink problem. And what is that? Because we have been adding technology after technology after technology.
Yes.
Oh, we need this side blunt zone, and I need an alert. Okay, add an alert, add this, add that, add that. Nobody thought, step back and say, hey, what is it doing to the consumer? What is it doing to
Yes.
the in-car experience? Am I inundating
Yep.
the consumer and also the overall in-car environment with this, right? So there's
Yep.
a huge place for going back, really stepping
Yes.
back, stepping away, and say, you know what, how can I simplify it? Simplify not just by adding features, by subtracting feature, how I
Yes.
can make it much simple so that I can just go in and drive and get benefit of the safety technologies without too much education. Okay, I agree that we need the education at the current level of
Oh
current
yeah.
state of affairs, but at the same time, and there will always be need for education
Yes.
for more informed drivers. But at
Hmm.
the same time, there is also a huge opportunity and need, I would say, to simplify the in-car environment,
Yes.
to simplify the features we have, and say, you know what, we don't need those features anymore. We don't need to cram in just because we can.
Right.
I
I had to say it.
agree.
I had to say it.
I agree.
Exactly. No, that's true, and that actually does kind of tie into our last segment for you here, which with yeah, it's easy to get inundated with just how much there is to learn, and so
Yeah.
we sometimes think like, okay, if I could just create the perfect car, what would it pare down to? Just
Hmm.
it probably wouldn't be as much as, like you said, the entire kitchen sink. And we actually got something along this line. So one of the cool things about the Features Talk podcast is the kind of engagement that we've had with the community, with our listeners. And we've been very fortunate to have listeners send in questions to us for us to address. And we always encourage, with the release of each episode, for everyone to ask us questions, things that are on your mind, things that you want us to go in more in depth about that we did talk about or that we didn't talk about. And um, especially for the times that we're going to have special guests on the program, we kind of have a little preview of like, here's what the topic's going to be about, and we have a lot of people chiming in with like stuff they want to hear about. So we had a great question from one of our listeners that I wanted to put to us here, and so they said, if your car could talk to the city and that whole infrastructure to make your daily drive smoother, whether it's avoiding traffic, finding parking, or improving safety, what feature would you want first?
Well, the GPS, when it came about, it really opened a floodgate of opportunities and potential function, right? And the fact that, the at a minimum, the car can say, I am here, okay,
Mhm.
is a huge enabler. So I would say I'll start from there, okay, having a robust connectivity between the vehicle and the back office, okay,
Mhm.
having some kind of locational understanding of where the car is, and having a robust pipe to my cloud and back. I think those are some of the important features it's nice to have. Having said that, I would also say that I'm a proponent of minimalism. I
Yeah.
wouldn't like to have too many things, but I would say, just like we take our smartphone for granted, our phone for granted, and I expect it to work everywhere, it doesn't. But we expect it to, right? And I think the car also needs to we need to make sure the car actually has that feature. It's not a smartphone on wheels. It needs far more reliability. It needs far more say technological savviness in terms of make guaranteeing that
Yes.
I have the functions every time, every single time, everywhere, right? So those are the things I would say I would love to see. I go to a lot of wilderness because of my photography, and there are times I'm so frustrated because I don't have any connections,
Yes.
anything like that. So I think that's a big deal, and I know there are things changing, satellite connectivity is coming on, but at the same time, I think two things are hugely important. One is affordability, and
Yep.
another is ubiquity. Okay, I mean,
Yep.
it has to work every time, everywhere. And I can say, right now I live in Michigan. I live in the city area. If I drive north, towards the farmland and countryside, within 2-3 hours, I continuously hit a lot of black holes, and it
Yeah.
doesn't matter whether you are a T-Mobile or an AT&T or a
Yeah.
Verizon subscriber, right? So it just reminds me that there are a lot of things that need to be done. We talk about connectivity, but here we are with so many black holes all around.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that kind
Luke,
of connectivity is.
take on that, Luke. What would be the feature for you?
Yeah, so the feature for me would be, uh, now we live in Southern California, so where it's pretty much, if we drive a couple hours in basically any direction, we're still in an urban area. Like we're still in a pretty tightly packed urban area, pretty much from in any direction outside of like maybe the beach, but even that, it's like unless you're going out to the sand and the ocean, you're in a tightly packed urban area with a lot of cars. And so for
Yeah.
me, the um the feature I would want most would just basically be a more comprehensive and more robust um, you know uh, traffic mitigation kind of system. I actually delivered from some work I'm doing right now. I actually went to deliver a vehicle to a customer in Valencia, which was about an hour and a half, about an hour and a half drive from over there, and then the drive back ended up being 5 hours
Oh Lord.
because because of an enormous thing that happened on the it was the 5 freeway, um, and of course, probably a lot of people had Google Maps up and all this stuff to like try and find the best way around, but of course, it was such a backup that everything was backed up. And so, um, things that, accidents happen, right? There's no way to like predict the future completely, but um, things to mitigate that kind of thing would really, really be good. Um, and um, so I would say it would be that for me.
Yeah.
So from being used to living in pretty much all urban area around here.
Yeah. But most importantly, I need a simple car. With the right technologies, yes, but it should be a simple car. I
Yes.
literally pine for that, and the car I'm driving actually is quite a simple car, but it has all the things I need.
Yes.
All the
Yes.
all the ADAS features and everything I need, but it still feels like a very simple car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, repairability is high on my mind,
Oh yeah.
because it'll be nice if you can guarantee 100% the car will last you, a lifetime without any headache. I'm
Hmm.
all for it, but that's not where it is. And given how busy we are every single
Yeah.
day for work, this, that, children, family, we need a respite. We need a car which is simple,
Yep.
reliable, easy to fix, always within reach. I can go somewhere and get it fixed if the trouble is. And every single car in the industry is vulnerable to, some technical problem or other, regardless of all the claims, beautiful claims we make.
Yes. No, I
Yeah.
agree.
What about you?
I will have to weigh in with the connectivity. I mean, it's very frustrating to experience areas where you don't have any connectivity at all on your mobile device. I mean, that's happened to me too many times, especially using navigation. All of a sudden, the navigation is not working anymore. We don't have MapQuest anymore. I grew up in MapQuest days where you print it out on
Yeah,
paper.
same.
There was no real time updates going on.
What's
Uh,
that? What's that?
so
Oh
I
yeah.
have to agree. And also, the maintenance and the cost. I completely agree with you on that too, Partha. That is probably one of the biggest deciding factors as to what vehicle you're going to purchase, actually.
Yeah.
And what you get. So I completely agree. We are at time. I have had a Partha, this was great. This was awesome. The conversation that we
Yeah, it
had,
was.
I feel like, people listening to this are going to have a lot of opportunities to change their perspective about how they see this shift happening. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise. This was a timely discussion, I would say, on how ADAS and even the idea of smart cities and consumer adoption, all of that intersect together.
Yeah.
And,
Mhm.
and how important it is for us to understand that it does intersect, and we're all playing a very important part in the execution of that. And so if you found this episode valuable, make sure you follow, make sure you share, and leave us a comment with your biggest takeaway. Let us know what your biggest takeaway was. Keep sending in those questions as well as to the content that you want us to talk about. I did research just a couple weeks ago on certain topics and realized there's not a lot of conversations that are happening here on this podcast. And so I'm glad that we're able to do this. Make sure that you're connecting with Partha and PG Mobility Analysis as well to follow the important work that he's leading in the future of mobility. And until next time, drive
Safely.
And thank you, Lisa, for inviting me. It's a great conversation, and these are things I live and breathe. So
Yes.
it's been fun, and hope maybe we'll do this again sometime in the future.
I'm
Yeah.
sure we will. We have lots to talk about. Okay.
Many things. All right. Thank you.